My name is Juliet Dane. I'm 30 years old and serve as a colonel in the United States Army. Tomorrow, I'll be sitting across from my father and brother at a high-stakes defense contract meeting. Only they have no idea I'm the Pentagon liaison with the final say. 5 years ago, I left this house without a farewell, tired of being the disappointment, the daughter who threw away her prospects by choosing military service over business school. My father once told me the Army was for those without real options. That was the last meaningful conversation we had. Tonight I'm back home for family dinner. My mother will talk about Logan's promotion, my father will nod proudly, and someone will ask if I'm still moving around so much. I won't argue, I won't correct them. Because tomorrow when their boss calls me Colonel Dane in front of a room full of executives, the silence will say everything. Let them have tonight. Tomorrow everything changes. The driveway felt narrower than I remembered. My old car used to fit comfortably here, but now my rented black SUV seemed out of place beside my mother's aging minivan. I turned off the engine, sitting in silence as the heater hummed softly. My palms were dry, military calm they'd call it, but my stomach still churned like before deployment. The porch light cast a warm yellow glow over the chipped welcome mat and faded front door. Nothing had changed, cracked steps, overgrown hedges, and yet I felt the weight of what awaited inside. That familiar mix of invisibility and scrutiny. I rang the doorbell out of habit. Juliet, my mother called from the kitchen, not bothering to come to the door. It's open. Of course it was. I pushed it open and stepped inside. The same floral scent, the same wall of framed photos. My brother's graduation, his wedding, his 2 boys. No pictures of me in uniform, not even the commissioning portrait I'd sent 5 years ago. Dinner was almost ready, my mother said without looking up as I entered the kitchen. Logan and Meryl were on their way. Logan had just received another promotion. You won't believe it, she added. I offered a polite smile. That's great, Mom. You'll have to congratulate him. He's leading the entire systems integration team now. Everyone at Dad's company says he's going places. That phrase used to haunt me, always sounded like a train I'd missed. Now it was just noise. The dining room table was set for 6. No name cards, but the seating was implied. Logan at the head, Dad on his right, Mom between them, and me somewhere that didn't matter. Logan and Meryl arrived right on time as usual. He wore a blazer that said, I'm important but not trying too hard, and she brought a bottle of wine none of us would truly enjoy but would pretend to appreciate. Hey Jules, Logan said, hugging me briefly and already scanning over my shoulder toward Dad. Long time. 5 years, I replied. He blinked, unsure if I was joking. I wasn't. We ate roast beef, mashed potatoes, and the same side salad Mom had made since I was 10. Logan held court effortlessly, talking about corporate restructures, bonuses, and his team's work for the military arm of the company. My father looked like he might cry from pride. My mother turned to me, her smile polite but empty. Still traveling with the Army? I took a sip of water. More or less. Still a captain? Dad asked, eyes fixed on his fork. Something like that. Must be tough being in the field all the time, Logan added. No long-term strategy, right? Just following orders. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. My uniform was folded carefully in the upstairs suitcase, the silver eagle insignia catching the light. Tomorrow they'd learn just how much strategy one held in my hands. For now I let them talk. Most of the evening I retreated to my childhood room, sitting on the edge of a twin bed covered with the patchwork quilt my grandmother had sewn when I was 12. The walls bore relics of a version of me they once believed in. Trophies, honor roll certificates, college acceptance letters. Before I joined ROC I was celebrated here. Afterward I became a cautionary tale. No awards for my cybersecurity achievements, no photos of deployments, no certificates for my promotions. None of the milestones that marked my true success. The most significant achievement of my life, a full colonel in Army Cyber Command at 30, remained invisible in this house. I remembered telling them about the ROC scholarship. I'd expected hesitation, maybe even pride. Instead I saw disgust. My father looked at me as if I'd thrown myself away. The military is for those without potential, he'd said. You're meant for more. He meant his version. An MBA, a corner office, a position at Westbridge Technologies, the defense firm he dedicated his life to. It was always supposed to be Logan. When Logan slipped effortlessly into that mold, the family's narrative was complete. I wasn't the daughter who chose her own path, I was the one who wasted hers. Downstairs I heard the echo of laughter. Dad's deep chuckle, Mom's soft smile, Logan's booming confidence. The sounds of a family gathered around a chosen successor. I'd grown used to it, but now the irony felt poetic. Logan had just been promoted to lead the systems integration team on the very military contract I would oversee tomorrow. He had no idea. Neither did they. At 0900 tomorrow, I would walk into Westbridge Technologies dressed in full uniform, brief the executive board as Pentagon liaison for Project Sentinel, and evaluate the very strategy Logan had boasted about at dinner. That uniform, midnight blue, pressed with ribbons and medals aligned perfectly, the colonel insignia gleaming, was a symbol of the person I'd become. I checked for stray threads, polished the buttons, and performed the ritual with mechanical precision. Tomorrow wasn't about revenge, it was about precision, presence, and performance. About showing them who I'd become in a language they couldn't dismiss or belittle. The next morning I arrived at Westbridge Technologies 15 minutes early. The parking lot was already alive with staff rushing in, security checks, lanyards, briefcases. I pulled into the reserved spot marked Military Liaison Deauthorized, stepped out in full uniform, adjusted my collar, and watched heads turn as I strode past the checkpoint. Some stared, some straightened, but no one questioned my presence. "Good morning, Colonel," the security guard said, scanning my badge with respect. It was a tone I'd never heard at my father's home. Inside, I bypassed reception, took the elevator to the executive floor, and had the layout memorized weeks in advance. When the doors opened, the first person I saw was Logan. He stood by the window, flipping through a sleek presentation tablet. His posture was relaxed, until he saw me. He blinked. "Juliet? What is that?" I didn't stop. I simply greeted him. "Good morning, Mr. Dane." Expectations. I was here for the project review. Behind him, my father's voice echoed as he appeared, deep in conversation with two men dressed in matching navy suits. Then he saw me and froze. "Juliet, what's going on? Why are you dressed like that?" he asked, eyes narrowing with confusion. He looked from me to the others in the hallway, trying to gauge their reactions. It was dawning on him slowly that something was off. Before I could answer, a tall woman with short white hair rounded the corner. Lorraine Hart, CEO of Westbridge Technologies, paused mid-stride when she saw me. Then her expression broke into a smile. She walked straight toward me and extended her hand. "Colonel Dane, I didn't realize you'd be attending in person." "A pleasure." I shook her hand. "I was in the area. Thought it would be useful to sit in on the briefing myself," I said. "Absolutely. Your presence will elevate the room just by being here," Lorraine chuckled. Then turning to the group behind her, she added, "Everyone, for those unaware, this is Colonel Juliet Dane, our Pentagon liaison for Project Sentinel. She has final approval authority on all military integrations for this project." The air seemed to thin out in the hallway. I didn't look at my father or brother then. Their silence told me everything. We entered the conference room together. My name was already on a placard at the head of the table beside Lorraine's. I sat down, reviewed my notes, and waited. The team started to arrive. Directors, engineers, project leads, each introducing themselves with careful politeness reserved for those who could freeze or approve millions in funding. Some were surprised I was so young. Most were surprised I was a woman. But once they saw the insignia, their reactions softened. Logan and my father entered last, seating themselves farther down the table, stiff and quiet. The meeting began promptly at 0900. Lorraine opened, then turned the floor over to me. "As we begin, I'd like to thank Colonel Dane for joining us in person. Her oversight has been invaluable, and her technical guidance has already refined key aspects of our cyber protocol design." I stood, briefed the room on progress, and outlined the critical changes needed before the next funding round. I made eye contact with each speaker, asked pointed questions, and requested documentation. When it was Logan's turn, he rose slowly, visibly unsettled. "As systems integration lead, I've been developing a new rollout strategy for Phase 2, he began, voice faltering. "I believe it aligns with our performance targets." I waited, arms crossed, letting him finish. Then I spoke. "Mr. Dane, could you clarify how your proposed method accounts for the latency thresholds specified in our last Pentagon memo?" He blinked. "I can revisit that portion," he replied. "You'll need to." Our benchmarks are non-negotiable. Please revise the protocol draft and submit it by close of business Thursday. He nodded quickly. Yes, ma'am. Silence fell briefly, then we moved on. I took control of the next discussion as if nothing had happened, though everything had. The meeting wrapped up in the early afternoon. Lorraine made a few closing remarks about transparency and collaboration, then turned to me. Colonel Denny will remain on-site through tomorrow for follow-up assessments. Please extend her full access and support. This project is critical to national security and our future partnerships. As people filed out, I felt their eyes lingering, not with curiosity anymore but with recognition. My credentials were no longer a secret. I had earned my seat at the table and they knew it. My father lingered outside the conference room just beyond the glass walls. He looked like a man who'd expected applause but instead found a tribunal. Juliet, he said once we were alone, searching for authority in his tone, we need to talk. I nodded. Your office, I replied. He hesitated, then gestured down the hall. Inside, the atmosphere thickened. My mother was seated stiffly in a visitor's chair. Logan stood by the window, arms folded, jaw clenched. The three of them, my childhood jury. I didn't sit. I stood at ease, hands behind my back, calm, unyielding. You've been a colonel for how long? My father finally asked. 6 months, I answered. 6 months, he repeated hollowly. And you didn't tell us? I did. I sent invitations to my promotion ceremony, emails, articles. I left voicemails. None of you responded. He opened his mouth to speak, but my mother cut him off. We didn't know what it meant, she said. Colonel, that sounds high, but we didn't understand. Why didn't you explain? Because I stopped trying to justify my worth, I said quietly. Every time I called, the first questions were about Logan's projects or your quarterly numbers. You never asked about me unless it was to suggest I quit the army and come home. We thought you were stuck, moving from place to place, never really going anywhere. Logan looked uncomfortable. You said last night that people in the military just follow orders, he said, laughing nervously. You laughed while saying it. I didn't know you were doing this, I said again. He shifted uncomfortably. My mother reached for her purse, then hesitated. Juliet, I don't know what to say. We should have been there for your commissioning, your graduation, all of it. I thought you were pushing us away. No, I replied. I just stopped hoping you'd show up. A thick, uncomfortable silence settled between us. My father finally cleared his throat. So, what do you want now? Recognition? An apology? A headline in the company newsletter? I shook my head. I want nothing but what I've always deserved. Respect for my work, my decisions, and the fact that I didn't fail just because I didn't follow your expectations. Logan finally stepped away from the window, studying the blueprints spread before him. You evaluated my presentation today and you were fair, he said softly. You didn't humiliate me. I wasn't there to, I replied evenly. I was just doing my job. He nodded slowly. It was impressive. Honestly, you were commanding. That might have been the first genuine compliment I'd ever heard from him. My father stood but didn't move closer. You've built something we don't understand, he said. That's on us. We thought we knew better. We didn't. For the first time I saw hesitation in his voice, not defeat but a beginning. He extended his hand not for show, but in a gesture I recognized from every military promotion I'd ever stood through, a quiet offering of respect. Colonel Dane, he said, voice rough, I owe you an apology. I underestimated you completely. I took his hand, grip firm but without bitterness, just closure. I accept, I replied. My mother blinked quickly, then stood. We'd like to try again if you'll let us, she said softly. One step at a time, I said, and for the first time in years I believed that might actually happen. 6 months later, my apartment in Washington, D.C., was quiet but full. The open-plan living room overlooked the skyline beyond the window, the city's glow reflecting softly off the glass. My bookshelf held medals tucked between cybersecurity textbooks and a few framed commendations from missions, just enough to remind me of the journey. That night my family joined me for dinner. At my table in my space, my father was the first to arrive, carrying a framed article. Figured you might want a copy, he said, handing it to me. It was a print feature from a defense journal celebrating the success of Project Sentinel. My photo was at the center. Me in full dress uniform standing beside General Armstrong and Lorraine Hart. He handed it over gently. I've had this up in my office for a few months now. Thanks, Dad, I said softly. That means something. My mother followed a few minutes later holding a warm pie tin with both hands. Apple, she said with an awkward smile. Still your favorite, right? It is, I replied. She looked around at my apartment, so clean, so organized. I don't know how you keep it like this, she said. I almost made a joke, military habit, but decided against it. He was trying and that was enough. Logan and his wife arrived last, carrying an expensive bottle of wine and a strange sense of ease I hadn't expected. After dinner, as the dishes clinked in the sink and conversation turned to quiet praise, Logan pulled me aside. I implemented the rollout structure you mentioned, he said quietly. The team didn't love it at first, but it works better than what we had. Did you tell them where you got it? I asked, raising an eyebrow. He grinned sheepishly. Eventually. After I let them think I was a genius for 5 minutes. I smirked. As long as it's working. He nodded. It is. And so are you. You really have it together. I looked over and saw my father examining the medals on the shelf. His eyes paused over one in particular. A cyber defense citation for counteracting a foreign breach that had nearly crippled federal networks. I read about that one, he said softly. Didn't realize at the time you were leading it. I confirmed. He didn't say more. Just nodded. It wasn't a parade and it wasn't a Hollywood ending, but it was real, and that made it better. Later, over coffee and pie, my father raised his glass in a quiet toast. To Colonel Juliet Dane, he said. Who proved that your worth isn't in following someone else's path, but in walking your own. We all raised our glasses. I looked around at that room, at the people who once doubted me, and saw something I'd never truly seen before. Recognition. Not pity, not tolerance, but genuine, earned respect that no one could take away. And in that moment I knew something important. The victory wasn't in them finally seeing me. It was that, even if they hadn't, I would keep going anyway. I'd thought I needed their approval, that someday if I worked hard enough they'd finally acknowledge me. But the truth was, I didn't need their recognition to be real. I was already enough. Walking into that boardroom in uniform wasn't revenge. It was clarity. I didn't need to explain who I was. My presence spoke for itself. They once told me I was wasting my potential, that I'd never become anything. And yet there I stood, leading the very project that had built their careers. That moment didn't erase everything. It didn't wipe away the past. But it proved something better. I never needed to follow their path to create value. So if they underestimate you, let them. Keep building. Keep rising. And when the moment comes, show up fully, calm, confident. Because the strongest proof of who you are isn't what you say. It's who you've quietly become.